Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Mignot, CEO of the experience agency D-Flash. This is the next interview in my series of 29 Days of Magic, where I basically interview an amazing Black woman every single day for Black History Month. It's a really awesome opportunity to hear from women who are just doing the damn thing, and I'm super psyched to have Dr. Wendy McDonald, also known as Dr.Everywoman, on the show. Yeah, she's a real-life doctor and at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. We're gonna have a great conversation about, Black women and our health and what you can do to be healthier, as well as, if you're looking to figure out how to live a little bit better, a little healthier. She's got lots of opportunities to sell some of those myths that you're always freaked out about online. She will have the answer. It's going to be a great conversation. Take a listen. Hi, Dr. Wendy.
Hey, how are you?
Oh, just interviewing people until I'm blue in the face.
Living your best life out here in the podcast world, and I love it.
I'm super psyched to have you on the show. I love your videos, which I'll throw in the show notes at the end.
Thank you.
So I'm super psyched to have this conversation with you. And as you know, first question is always the same, and I'm sure your answer is going to be pretty interesting. So Dr. Wendy, what was your first job?
My first job was as the assistant to the dean in my high school. So I was like the little minion shot caller who made sure that the people in the lunchroom didn't act a whole fool. You know what I mean? I reported back. I was like, such and such shouldn't be throwing food, and they are. No, I don't think I actually ever did that, but I wanted
You
to.
were a
I was
snitch.
trying, you know what I mean?
Your job was to be a snitch.
I was the snitch. I was a snitch. I was also, the half friend that, would loan money sometimes. I'm like, did they keep me around because I would give you 15 cents if you need it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know. But, I think I've grown since those days to not totally narc on my friends, left and right.
Well, okay. And you got paid to be a snitch. But so you were always paying attention to what was going on around you.
I was. And
And
I
providing
like
information.
and I like to follow the rules, and I like other people around me to follow the rules. I've since decided to break some rules in my career, but that's okay too.
Those are lessons that you did learn when you were a small child. So
Exactly.
how do you go from being a snitch to becoming Dr.Everywoman? Like what's that journey like?
So I, as a small child, knew my best friend actually was just a girl that went to school with me, and her mom was an OBGYN. So I was like, man, that's so cool. Like whenever she tell me what she did, and she's like this Black woman who, went from being a flight attendant to being like, I'm gonna be a doctor. And she was like gorgeous and had swag, and she was an OBGYN. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. So up the ranks through high school, college, med school.
You always knew. Wow.
I knew when I was in like pre-K or kindergarten. Like it went back into the history books for me. My parents tell me about talking about being a doctor well before I can remember talking about being a doctor. But it all came from her. It all came from Dr. Lassiter. I was like, she's dope. So, kind of ascended into this career of being an OBGYN. But just about 3 years ago is when I decided to, off of a random video that I made on the way home from call, singing some song on the radio. And folk were like, oh my God, what is she doing? And then I recalled as a kid always liking to rewrite like commercials to be like I'm like, the commercial should have said this, and the commercial should have said that. And I'm like, I could do that with songs. And so the Dr.Everywoman emerged out of me trying to spread healthcare messages and just make people laugh, because I'm a total fool also in my own life. But taking popular songs and things that people know about and are familiar about, but changing it to healthcare topics. So one of my first ones, I think I was driving to work and I was listening to New Edition, If It Isn't Love. And I just rewrote that to say it's chlamydia, because sometimes you have chlamydia. Sometimes you don't know what it is, but it's chlamydia. So it fit.
That's amazing. And so, it's really funny because, like, I know you because, the videos are hilarious, but they're also so super informative. So I would love for you to sort of explain, like, what the purpose of them are and how you explain, because I know that you just, like, break things down for simple, easy people to understand.
And I try to, because I think it comes from knowing where I came from as a kid of two parents, one from West Virginia, one from Mississippi, and the African American experience coming from that kind of immigration to Chicago was not one that was super informed about healthcare topics. So going from, the kid that never had anybody who was a doctor or a nurse or anybody in the family to being a doctor, I remember not knowing stuff. I remember learning throughout my training, like, oh, that's not necessarily true, or that's not how you get that infection, or that's how you don't, like just learning, like abolishing myths in my own years. So I feel like that frame of reference helps me to know, because I think that's where some docs miss the mark. You don't really know what people don't know, or you don't really know where they're starting from. You got to meet people where they are. So I remember where I was, and I know when people come to see me, and especially when I see recurrent things, people asking me, the same question repeatedly, I jot it down. I'm like, ooh, people don't know how why you have heavy bleeding, or how heavy is too heavy a bleeding, or, again, how do you get chlamydia, or this is important to know when you're pregnant. Like, let me jot that down and take it from that information that I didn't know or that they don't know to where we are now. And I think that's the basis. I try to make sure every video these days, ever since I kind of started having fun with it, I try to make sure every video has a purpose that takes people from a place where they may be misinformed to now being informed.
Awesome. And, I think a lot of it is that people, especially, Black women with regard to health, there's so many scary things out there. And
Yeah.
I'd love for you to kind of give some myth dispellers.
There's so many. I don't even know where to start.
I think the first one is, there's been a tremendous amount of news around Black women and mortality rates when
Yes.
they're pregnant. So
Yes.
can you please tell everyone that Black women will not always die when they're going to have a baby?
It's real. It's so real. I actually wrote an article about this a couple of years ago. I'll send it to you after this. But the article broke down the reasons why we die, because the stats are real. The stats are not like, hyped or trumped up. But what the issue I have with the stats is that people took that information and said, okay, if we're dying more in doctors in hospitals, then we need to avoid hospitals, which is not the route that we need to go. Like, that's the opposite of the route that we need to go. If anything, we need to be more diligent and more aware so that we don't get passed over, looked over, or not, receive the care that we need, because we are dying, unfortunately, more so from hypertension, preeclampsia, blood clots, things like that, where you have to be actually watching us more closely, not less closely. So I started to see some articles when I wrote my article about, like, Black women transitioning to more home births because of the fear of Black maternal mortality. And I'm like, like, I don't know, right, stop that. And I'm not telling somebody who had a home birth, like, oh, you're wrong, because thank God if you made it through that you made it through it safely. But I have personally seen situations where if this person were not in this hospital right now to get this acute care, they would have died, their baby could have died. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to take those types of chances. So I think the biggest thing to know is prenatal care is so important. If you don't think you're being heard or your concerns are being heard, go see another provider if you can. If God willing, if you have the resources to get a second opinion, do that, because I don't think every doc is really paying attention either. I'm not going to lie and say that, like, oh, we're all perfect. Sometimes we're not paying attention. Sometimes we're overworked or overwhelmed or have our own biases where we're not really being as attentive as we need to. But I have a mentality that everybody could die, which means that I need to watch. If your blood pressure is creeping up, we need to check it again in another day or two, or you need to check it at home too, or you need to go get some labs sent right now to see, are you preeclamptic, not like, oh, let me see you in a week. You see what I'm saying? Like, we need to be even more diligent.
What's sort of the best way to be your best advocate for your health? Is it to get a doula? Is it to have, other family members, partners also speaking up for you? Like, what is, also oftentimes people don't. So what?
Yeah.
One?
doulas are cool, and I think if you have access to a doula, I don't have any problem with that. I think doulas are more for support of you and keeping you not super stressed during the labor process. I don't know that doulas are super protective from a healthcare perspective, because I don't know that they're necessarily following your blood pressure or, you know, the things that could be potentially like dangerous. But I do like doulas, and I support doulas. I think the best thing, if I could put out like a single best, and I've never really, you know, recommended this, but I think it makes sense. Bring a notepad. Bring a notepad with you to the doctor's office. Bring your questions. Write down things that you may or may not have questions about. Ask those questions. It is intuitive for some people to hear something that they don't really understand and be like, okay, and just keep it moving. No, ask the question, what does that mean? What could happen if this is the case? You're telling me that this is my blood pressure. Is that normal? What's normal? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think keeping notes, and not so much to have an antagonistic relationship with your provider, because you want to be working together. You and your provider need to work together. They don't need to feel always like you're on the defense, but you do need to be aware of what's happening. And I think understanding, having that person explain things to you, having, you know, again, your list of things that you are concerned about, I think is invaluable.
Yeah, so, you know, literally write down, and if you
Write it down.
if you feel weird, go to the hospital.
If
And
you're weird, go to the hospital. Bring somebody with you if you feel like you don't feel as comfortable by yourself. So for sure, I think if you can do that. But yeah, if you feel weird, go to the hospital. If you are concerned about something, write down what you're concerned about and run it. See if you can run it by another provider, or if you know somebody, you know what I mean? Like, I think that sometimes getting that reassurance helps. And be careful with Dr. Google, because Google can sometimes send you off.
right, I was just about to say, like, you know, burn Dr. Google to the ground.
Yeah, because the internet can
Stop.
be beautiful, but it can mess you up thinking like, oh, I gotta be, I'm dying. Like, maybe you're not dying. You know, Dr. Google doesn't know you, but you could like definitely still express your concerns and find out what it takes to know that this is not the case. Oh, I'm worried I have a blood clot. How would I know if I have a blood clot? I'm worried that my blood pressure is elevated. What's elevation? What are the signs of preeclampsia? Like, jot that stuff down so that you don't feel, you know, like you don't have the information that you need to be safe.
I think that's so very important, because I think a lot of it's just been a lot of scary stuff on the news. You know,
Very.
what happens with a number of Black women who've died. You see what happened with Serena
Yeah.
Williams and Beyonce.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait,
Yeah.
hold up, they're rich as hell.
And I'm saying, when I'm reading the Serena Williams story, I'm like, wait, she had a blood clot before, and she had to convince them to get a CT scan. I'd have been ordered a CT scan when she felt crazy, when her vital signs started looking crazy. Like, the default shouldn't be, oh, you're fine. The default should be, let's make sure you're fine. Let's do as much as we can without going so crazy. I'm not saying everybody needs a whole full body scan, but she was at risk. You know, same thing with Beyonce. Beyonce was carrying twins, a significant risk factor for preeclampsia. Like, you know, and I'm not saying she was mistreated, because I don't know that she was, but like, these things, we are more at risk for those things, and we need to be aware. And we also, I think, need to understand that pregnancy and labor and delivery is a fluid process. So there are people who I see, even, this is Black, white, all kinds of people, who might say, I want this, I want a vaginal delivery, I want an unmedicated, I don't want an IV. Don't push away science. Don't push away science, because that is sometimes a factor too in us not being as safe. If your baby's heart rate is abnormal and we can't get it back normal, my friend, you might need a C-section. You know what I'm saying? If your blood pressure is out of control and we can't get you to 10 centimeters before, like, you're at risk for stroke, you might need to deliver a different way than you plan to deliver. And I don't even know, before I go into somebody's delivery, how they're going to deliver. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be a little flexible going into it. I'm not saying you can't have goals or wishes, but you have to be a little flexible, because the process can change.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that we have to sort of let people understand, that, you know, this is, you know, science is still our friend, and
Yes,
it's, and you know, but science and advocacy go hand in hand.
for sure.
So
For sure.
okay, another thing that I think a lot of, especially Black women, hear about is that fibroids are coming to take over your entire uterus.
Oh yeah.
What and why? How? What?
The
Like,
evil fibroid.
what's going
The
on with
evil
this? Well,
fibroid.
again, it
And
seems
I
like.
wish. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just wish I had a whole research team, because I know there's some research, but honestly, I think that this is a failure of science, that we don't understand them as much as we could potentially. We don't understand them. We don't know why. People tell me, well, if I don't eat sugar or if I stay away from animal products, they won't grow. And I'm like, I know whole vegan, vegetarian, all things who have fibroids bigger than me. You know what I mean? And so with this, unfortunately, not as easy as that. I do think we can live as healthy of a life as possible, and, and have a decent amount of plant-based diet. I'm not saying everybody has to be vegan or vegetarian, but a decent amount of plants in our diet. I think that's important. But, unfortunately, we don't know why people get them, especially us as African American women get them. I think a lot of it's genetics. I have them, many of us have them. And we don't necessarily have to remove them unless they're problematic. I'm a huge proponent of, if your fibroids aren't bothering you, they're not bothering me. But if they cause heavy, you know what I mean? They could be
Right.
there. You know what I mean? We can coexist. But if they're causing heavy bleeding, or they're pressing on things, or they're impeding pregnancy, they may have to be, modified or go. But we do have them. We have them. Asian women have them. Some Latino women have them. So we're not the only ones. I have some Caucasian women who definitely deal with symptomatic fibroids. So we're not the only ones. But they do, unfortunately, get a little bit bigger with us, and they can become more problematic with us. So it's a challenge. I'm sorry, this phone's ringing in the background. It's a challenge, though.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you being like, listen, this is it. Everybody gets them.
Everybody gets some, yeah.
It's another interesting thing I've been seeing online, where I'm like, are y'all crazy? Where people assume that now there's STDs are gone and STIs are gone, and so everyone's just like,
oh my God,
without having condoms anymore. And I'm like, what's wrong with you people?
Listen, how, Sway? How? You know what I'm saying? I really struggle with that one, with the, oh, well, I don't use protection. Are you trying to get pregnant? No. Are you worried about STDs? No, I don't think I have anything. I'm like, Lord, help me.
Exactly.
I have to pray in the middle of the consultation, because I'm like, give us some wisdom. Give us wisdom. Condoms are so important. And for some reason, now I will say this, because I was just reading about this. STD rates are rising, and some of it is because we're forgetting our bread and butter, our grassroots. The barrier is the way to protect from most things. And I love other forms of birth control, but you need that barrier, and you need to know that you and that partner are negative before you, remove that barrier. But one thing that I was reading is that public policy and healthcare funding is also a significant impacting our STD rate significantly, in that there's less dollars and resources going to testing, to the number of providers that are even out there to be able to test. So, some of it's also, we need to vote and make sure that we're getting people in office that care about healthcare funding, and not letting us have like a dry up of some of our healthcare sites around, especially in lower income areas. It's not just lower income areas that are being affected, but that's a factor too. Like, let us not just think it's just us not using condoms. Some of it is also us not having access to healthcare to be able to screen and get our results and get treated.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I'm just, amazed by when I hear this, and I'm like, why do you think AIDS disappeared? Like, because I'm still alive? Like, what's wrong with you?
No, alive and well. And we just think like, oh, if I would feel something, that's such a common myth too. I would know if I had an STD. Trust and believe, I almost never call somebody. Like 99% of the time I call somebody with an STD, they had no idea they had it. They don't come to me talking about, I think I got an STD. Most people, when I call them with a positive, are shown enough surprised, which is why I offer STD screening to everyone every time I see them. I'm like, whenever you either have a new partner, or even if you're the same partner, it's available to you if you want me to test you, because stuff happens, and I'm seeing a lot out here. So don't be shy or ashamed, or think you're like insulting your partner by testing. Like, testing is a safety precaution for you, I think, not an insult to the person you're with.
Yeah, and they shouldn't. And if they act as if it's like, oh my God, then you have a bigger problem that's non-healthcare.
Right. We need to both be safe. Like, why are you mad that I want to be safe? Why aren't you out here getting tested?
It's kind of shocking.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other sort of like good health tips that we should just, especially from women in our health? Like, I oftentimes think that, like, people think, oh, something can't happen to me because I'm under 30, under 40, don't have any family history. But like, just what's some good common health tips, like self-checks and all that good stuff?
Self-check of your breasts, making sure that you're aware if your cycles are changing. definitely self-care of the breast and monthly self-breast exams, I think is something that any and every person should do at any age without any family history, making sure that you even know what they feel like. Breast self-awareness is the thing I promote to people because they often are afraid, like, what am I checking for? What am I looking for? Just know what's normal for you, and then you have a reference point if something changes. And to your point earlier, people often don't check or aren't kind of aware because sometimes they're afraid of, what if I find something? What if something's abnormal? But no, especially something like breast cancer, God forbid, you get that, and that is so treatable if it's early. Like 99% of people are surviving that if you catch it in like stage 0, which is like the really, really, really early stages, and so this is one that's not necessarily a death sentence. It could be a life sentence if you check it, a life sentence in a good way, if you catch it early. And the same is true for heavy bleeding. No need to be out here, hemorrhaging every month, but, and not asking those questions as to like, is this okay? Is this normal? Because you could be depleting your iron stores and depleting like the parts of your body that you need to have supplied with vitamins and minerals because you're not checking and keeping up with yourself. So I think those things are the main ones. We should not underestimate the value of exercise, of drinking not that much alcohol. Like I have my drink every now and then too, but not every day and not in large quantities. You know what I mean? Because that's also a risk factor for cancers and other kind of health problems. Smoking, like we, especially as African American women, need to put them cigarettes down because our heart disease rates are not small. We are at risk of that. So we need to be super diligent about caring for our bodies, because all of that's even going to potentially benefit like tumor growth, cancer growth, fibroid growth, all of that. So those things, those self-care things, not to be taken lightly. I was talking to my husband yesterday. We were talking about like, people saying, oh, I only live once, so I'm going to live how I want to. I'm only live once. But how do you want to live? Like, how do you want this thing to end? Do you want to end up on dialysis at the end? Do you want to be on, you know what I'm saying? Or do you want to be able to live your best, fullest life, seeing your grandkids and your great grandkids? Then do the best you can.
Exactly. I think oftentimes we get so busy, we forget about why we have to take care of ourselves. It's like, hustle, 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 especially if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to be a power woman in business. And, and like, I think I've learned this lesson myself, where it's like, you gotta exercise. You gotta
exercise.
Gotta meditate, gotta chill.
All of that.
Because,
meditation, practicing mindfulness, I have definitely learned the value of all of that, and even just what we contribute to the world. Like, I feel like the other thing people sometimes come to me with is like, I'm getting older, what if I have kids or don't ever have kids? And I feel like children is not the only thing either. Like, we are in a stage in our lives where I don't think everybody needs to conceive, and people can live a very like robust and fulfilled life, giving something to the world, you know what I'm saying, that they create or that they foster or what have you. So I think that form of self-care too is important, where women don't get so caught up in where their life has led them to the point of, if or when they will have children. I feel like we're so much more than that,
Absolutely. And, I think oftentimes people, like I said, Dr. Google freaks people out, and it's only when something happens do they go, oh my God. But instead, I think it's much more about trying to live, a good, healthy, active life.
Yes.
That's going to be the key to it all. Oh, one thing I think people are always kind of like, because I know this because I'm now over 35, is freezing their eggs. And I'm like, I didn't do it because I went to my doctor, and they're like, you don't need to. But what's your take on it? Because I'm always going to open for a third or fourth opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's where that even my last statement came from. I feel like that's the common question these days. Should I be freezing my eggs? Like, what's going on, doc? Like, how much longer do I have? And if you ask a fertility doc, because I've asked them, the reproductive endocrinologist, when a person should freeze eggs, they'll say 28, 25, as early as you can. Now, practicality says, who's out here at 28 freezing eggs? Like, very few people. Why would they do that?
Right.
But the point of me sharing that is, the earlier the better. If you already know this is not something this is something I want. First question is it something you want? Because everybody doesn't have to want. Just because grandma and them are like, when are you gonna have some babies? everybody don't have to want to have babies or want to have babies from their own uterus, right? Or from their own eggs and genetic material. But if that's something that you know that you want, and you can kind of project out like, the way my life is looking like it's shaking out, it might not happen till my late 30s or early 40s, then consider freezing eggs. But if you're, somebody who's 32, 33, 35, and you think, well, one, maybe I don't even want to do it, or two, as far as having children or having your own egg children, but two, maybe you're like, it might happen in the next 2 or 3 years, then maybe you don't need to do this, need to freeze eggs. I think that your fertility rates change substantially between 35 and 40. At 35, they're still pretty close to like where they were at 30, 31, 32, but between 35 and 40, they change pretty substantially. So you can look ahead and say, it's probably not going to happen until give or take 40 or 40 plus. Consider it. If you have another, $10,000 laying around, go ahead and consider it. I don't think it's wrong to consider, but I think it's not something that everybody needs to drop everything and do, because there's a lot that goes into that too. There's a lot of, again, financial, stuff, but also physical stuff. It's not an easy process for some. So I don't know if that helps. You could go both ways with it, though, is the point.
Yeah, I think you have to make your own decision and then look at your health and
Yeah.
and make your own decision for yourself.
Yes.
So getting back to Dr. Wendy,
Yeah.
you've been how long have you been an OBGYN now?
I finished my residency training in 2011. So I'm coming up on, this is my 9th year in private practice without being in training. Technically, I've been an OBGYN though since 2007. So then that put me at like 13 years of actually being the doc, but not on my own since 2011. So I'm up there, I've been in the game a little bit, you know what I mean?
You don't, because I will say that you're the only Black OBGYN I know.
There's only 2%. There's only 2% of us out here of like Black female doctors, not even Black female OBGYNs. Black female doctors is 2% of the physician population, which is unfortunate. And that's
2%?
2%, my friend.
Wow.
That's one of my goals. So one of my goals just in my career and in this whole branding space of being Dr.Everywoman is to help people to understand their health. But the other part is to try to be a face, be an example, tell people more about and help them to understand more about what it takes to get into this field. Because if you don't see it, you might not want to be it. And I was fortunate to see one, to know one, and to be like, oh, I want to do what she does. I just saw a lady the other day who was from Chicago, South Side. And she's like, where are you? I always get people's business. I'm like, where are you from? Where you from? Blah, blah, blah. And she says, where am I from? I told her I'm from the South Side, Chicago. She's like, what? You're from the South Side? From down the street from me? And you're a doctor? Like, it was like astounding to her that was possible. And I'm like, it's been possible. So I want to be an example for kids and young adults to know, like, look, this is something you could do if you want to do it,
And be great at it. And still be cool and still love hip hop and like.
Exactly. You don't have to give up who you are to know more about your health and to be able.
But you're also a working mother. Like, how do you have time to breathe?
What you don't know is I've been running from my children during this whole podcast because I told them, and now I hear them coming. I'm like, oop, I gotta dodge. Oop, gotta get out the way. You know what I'm saying? Because they gonna mess up my recording. No, it's good though. I have a lot of support. My husband's great. He's a doc too, actually, and he's trying to get in this media game as well. And my parents, they live in the South Side of Chicago, and they help us periodically if we need it. But I'm fortunate. God is good, and I've been able to really try to do it all. I don't sleep like I should sometimes. That's self-care number one that I need to work on. But I definitely am grateful to be able to try to spread myself in these different places.
Yeah, I think it's incredible, but I also think it's just a shining example that, like, look, you went to medical school, you picked a profession, and then, but you still also, you never like not had a life. So you found a good man, and then you had kids, and you're like, I will figure out I will find a way, like as most women always do.
That's right. We're so resourceful in that regard, right? We make it happen.
Yeah, we just figure out a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been a challenge for you in your career? Because I'm sure it has not been sunshine and roses for all the things you've had to go through, especially being a Black woman, OBGYN in a major city.
I feel like I haven't run into a lot of discrimination, whether it be like minority discrimination or even female discrimination. What a great thing about being an OBGYN is it's a very female heavy profession. So you don't see a lot of guys looking at you like, why are you here? If anything, when they're here, we're like, what you doing over here? You know what I mean? But we welcome them too. But but that part I haven't really been challenged with, which is good. One thing I find myself challenged with, honestly, is and again, this part of my mission is our set of information as patients to doctors. So if I'm trying to tell somebody, hey, I recommend that you get this, for example, flu shot. It's a challenge for some, and I don't judge people if they don't want it. But when they're pregnant, I do tell them why it's important, because there's a lot of risk when it comes to pregnancy and influenza. And I spend extra time making sure that my, especially African American patients, understand how and why it's important. And a lot of them come and understand, hear me and get it, because they understand why it's important and how it's important. But it's challenging, and I'm grateful that I have the ability to do that. But it's hard because I know that I could see more patients or not be running so late if I just either said, well, you don't want it, pass on, you know what I'm saying? And like moving on. I have a special interest and care for us to understand certain things that we push back, against sometimes, more so than some of my not us patients, but I feel that pull is stronger for me to be like, look, I just want to make sure you understand this, so that you don't just say no because you're used to saying no and your mama said no or your grandma said no. You see what I'm saying? It's challenge that to me is the biggest challenge, because I don't want to let us just not know or not have the information just because we pushed.
Got it. No, it's that balance, because I know
It's a balance.
Yeah, I mean, my mom's a nurse, so but I can't stand the sight of blood. So hospitals give me panic attacks, like no joke.
Yeah.
So I really hate going to the doctor, but also because I grew up with a mom who's a nurse, like I usually, if I don't feel well, I just call her and I ask her. But I always one of the ways I always advocate for myself when I go to the doctor is like the first words out of my mouth. My mom's a nurse, and she has been for 40 years. So like, to me, like I'm not taking every single thing that you say without running it by like the family physician in my house.
And it makes sense. It makes sense to do that. But I think that also helps to protect you to a degree, that people don't speak to you like you don't know anything, or give you, like no information and just say, oh, she's not going to listen to me. It's like, no, come to me with the information based on a baseline amount of information that I'm bringing to the table, which is what I'm hoping to share with people. Come to the table with your physician with a baseline amount of information that'll help you to be able to have those conversations and understand what they're saying, and then make your own decisions based on that.
Exactly. I'm always amazed by it all. I'm like, y'all really? Okay. It's not that difficult. All right. So you're Dr. Wendy. You make all these awesome videos as well as work. What's a shift like for you? Are you on like a 12-hour shift, a 20? How many babies a week do you deliver?
I just delivered a baby a few hours ago, actually. This morning I was at the
Aww.
hospital. There's 3 of us in the practice, soon to be 4. So we deliver. I usually have 1 call day a week, which is a 24-hour call day, which is not necessarily at the hospital. I'm there if I need to be, or if I have to round, if I'm delivering a baby, but I could just as easily be in the office and home. And then weekends, I might do like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, so that we each can have a whole weekend off. So I delivered a baby, 2 babies on Friday. I didn't deliver anybody yesterday. But I did round, and I was in the office for part of the day, and then delivered a baby this morning. And then we'll see. My pager's still on, so we'll see who calls.
Do you still have a pager in 2020?
So, good question. I do. And there's a split. There's a divide amongst the docs in the world that I know, because some people have their pages come straight to their phone, and some people still carry a pager. A good amount of us still carry a pager. It's almost like analog, like a transistor radio versus like super high tech stuff. I could be in a basement, like in a garage somewhere, and get a page. My phone has 0 connectivity, but I got that page. And so I prefer a pager because it is more basic, because the basic part of it ends up being sometimes more reliable. I don't have to worry about my phone battery being dead or what my reception is like. I'm going to have my pager, and it's going to go off if it needs to go off.
Interesting. Oh, wow.
Yep.
So a pager. That's wow. Cool.
So my pager works. Like, I know, even if my phone battery is, whatever, if my kids take my phone, which is probably what's going to happen in a few minutes, you know what I mean? Like, but my pager is left alone with this little AA battery, and I'm going to get that page. So yeah, there's a good number of us still out here too. I was in a physician workroom not too long ago, and it was a whole debate happening in there about who still carries a pager and who doesn't. And the room was split. I was like, I love this.
That's awesome. So wow, so you'll have a full week on a weekly basis all the time.
Mhm.
So how do you
Yeah.
make time for Dr. Wendy?
I
Like, what's your
mean, so
self-care routine away from the new babies that you have to deliver, the ones you actually
yep.
have at home that belong to you and you give
Right.
birth to, and the rest of your life? Like, how do you take
Yep.
care of
So
you?
I just got a personal trainer, and so I have a scheduled appointment once a week with my personal trainer. I
Awesome.
work out, a couple times. I try to work out a couple times depending on what my schedule is like outside of that too. But I do that to be accountable, so I don't show up the next week and she look at me like, "So you ain't worked out?" So I do that. I do step away sometimes, go get some food, just sit down somewhere, read a book, write something down. And sometimes actually my videos are a little bit more of my self-care because I feel like that's my creative work that is outside of my actual job, outside of my obligations at home. It's like the thing that I do that I enjoy. I used to crochet and knit and stuff, and now that's kind of my mind space where I'm like, this is just me having some fun, and it's wonderful that people like it and it benefits people, but that's part of my self-care actually.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. I mean, Dr. Wendy, I could talk to you until it's blue in the face, because I have so many questions. But
Well,
I
we'll
want,
just have to do this again. That's what it is. We just have
yeah,
to make it
yeah,
happen.
absolutely. But I do have a final question for you. What is your give and what is your ask for our audience? Um, would you like to promote something? Would you like to offer something? Would you like to request something? Part of the reason I'm doing this sort of 29 days of magic is that, like, I absolutely want all 29 women to connect and get to know each other, because I've
Hmm.
deliberately picked a wide swath of people. Like, I didn't post this where I could have posted this to get this kind of crew of amazing women. I deliberately sort of let the universe kind of come to me and see who comes
Yeah,
in my lap,
I
because
love
I wanted to get this kind of neat mix. And then just too, we've gotten a lot of great response when we kicked off, and I'm hoping this will be a great way to amplify all the women who are part of this as well. So
I love that.
take it away.
Well, my give is my information and my time, and I'm hoping that it's almost synonymous with my ask, which is to follow me, on all the platforms, Dr. Everywoman, Dr. Everywoman, because I want to share. I want the platform to grow. I want people to know that I exist, that people like me exist, and that this information is free to be received and to be ingested. And I also am hoping to create a bigger platform as it grows, that will help to, like, I have visions of grandeur to create, and I already have prototypes in my head. I need to get a prototype of a toy that children can play with that will help them to understand their body parts and to potentially spur some interest in the healthcare professions. So following me and being kind of in my camp will help me to be hopefully a force in the next decade to show that and I'm hoping to, as we get more young people interested in the healthcare professions, that'll also decrease our maternal mortality rate, Black maternal mortality rate, and our just healthcare in general will improve as there's more like-minded people who are helping each other. Sometimes when it is the other who's caring for you, you don't receive it, they don't receive you. And if there's more of us together who are learning about our healthcare and understanding how to be healthier, then I would like to believe that all of us will be healthier in the end.
Exactly. Well, I will put all of your details in your show notes. And one thing I have to say that I always appreciate with you, it's not just from the videos, but the articles that you write, is that it's in plain English, and that I think is a gift that you have, because I think a lot of times when people try and read stuff when they go into Dr. Google, it takes
Yeah,
them down all kinds of crazy paths and it freaks them
yeah,
out. And you write in like this conversation we're having, like, brass tacks, here's what you need to be talking about.
yeah, yeah. Good.
Um,
I'm
and
glad.
so that's wonderful. So we'll put all your awesome details, links to your phenomenal videos on
Thank
YouTube.
you.
And it's such a blessing to have someone with your expertise on the show, because I think that's just so necessary. So thank you so much, Dr. Wendy.
Well, I appreciate you, Laura, and I really appreciate you just giving this platform, and I look forward to us like working together in the future, because I do think that, you know, this could go even further. But I really appreciate you letting me on the podcast.
Absolutely, my pleasure. And as I said, all the ways to find contact Dr. Wendy will be on our show notes and in social when we post this. And that is our show.